do you know whether you're sad or whether you're actually depressed? A lot of people talk about being depressed when what they mean is that they're going through a bit of a bad patch. Maybe they're feeling sad at the moment. So how would you know if you have clinical depression or whether you might have clinical depression? This video is going to be a quick overview of the difference between sadness and depression. I'm Karen Andrews. I'm a clinical psychologist, and my mission is to bring mental health into every home. In my videos, I talk about all matters relating to mental health and psychology. Sadness or grief is inevitable because loss is a part of the human experience, and we cannot avoid the experience of loss in our lives. But sadness is an adaptive, in fact, it's a healthy response, whereas depression is a mental illness that requires intervention. So what is sadness? Sadness as an emotion is a bit like the weather. It comes and goes, and you may experience all kinds of emotions within a single day. Sadness is not a state of being. It's temporary, and it usually doesn't last for very long, although it may recur very frequently depending on the reason why you're sad. If your sadness is part of grief, then it most probably comes in waves. The waves may be incredibly intense and overwhelming when you experience them, but between the waves, you may actually feel quite normal. And in fact, when you're grieving, realizing that you're feeling normal and maybe even laughing can actually trigger a whole new wave of grief. The sadness of grief is also specifically connected to thoughts or images about the loss or the person who has been lost. Grief or sadness doesn't usually impact your self-esteem. It doesn't change your opinion about your self-worth. It tends to fluctuate from day to day, and over time, it usually does get better. So what is depression exactly? Depression is an illness that is more formally known as major depressive disorder, and it is a serious illness that impacts your ability to function in your life. It causes significant distress and really gets in the way of you living your life to the full. It gets in the way of your relationships, it gets in the way of your ability to function occupationally, i.e. at work, and it gets in the way of your ability to function at home. Depression is a lot more common than you may have realized. It's estimated that something like 1 out of 15 people are depressed at any given time, and 1 in 6 people experiences depression at least once in their lifetime. That's a lot. It's really important to rule out other causes of depression as your starting point. Go to your doctor, get a full blood checkup, and make sure that you are not deficient in one or more important vitamins that has a huge impact on your mood and your ability to function. If you are deficient in vitamin D, vitamin B12, or if you're anemic, these can all have massive impact on your mood and your ability to function. Another problem that does crop up as a cause of depression is thyroid issues. So it's important that you rule these things out. So what are the signs of depression or depressive illness? Sadness is one of the major symptoms, but sadness is only one in a constellation of symptoms that must present together for you to be diagnosed with depression. If you have suffered a loss and you're in the midst of grief, your sadness may be quite extreme, and it is possible that your grief may trigger a depressive episode. So if your sadness goes on and is unrelenting, then it's worth taking it seriously, especially if it occurs in combination with other symptoms that I'm about to go through. If you have found this video to be useful so far, then please click the like and the subscribe buttons, because it's really helpful in terms of the algorithm, and it helps to support me to make more videos about mental health. So in order to meet a diagnosis of depression, you must experience at least 5 of the following symptoms for most of the day, nearly every day, for at least 2 weeks. The first area where you will experience a change in your ability to function is in your cognitive functioning. So you might find that it's really difficult to think straight. You might battle to make decisions. Your attention and concentration may be affected. You may find yourself suddenly forgetful in a way that you were not previously. In terms of these symptoms and signs of depression, it's important to keep in mind that the symptoms that I'm about to describe must represent a change in your functioning from the way that you were previously to the way that you are now. So if you were always forgetful, being forgetful is not a symptom of depression. If you always had difficulty with attention and concentration, then having attention and concentration problems is not a symptom of depression. Whereas if you've always had laser focus and were able to think beautifully clearly, and suddenly you find yourself unable to finish a chapter of a book or unable to concentrate during work meetings, then that could be a symptom. The second important sign is that you will feel a negative change in your ability to enjoy the things that you used to enjoy. Depression is characterized by an inability to feel joy or to take pleasure in things, especially from the things that you used to enjoy or take pleasure from. Maybe the things that used to cheer you up just don't work anymore. The third major sign is a big change in your mood and your emotions. Often depressed people will talk about feeling flat or empty. Others may have a mood that goes up and down like a yo-yo. Some people will find themselves extremely irritable with a very, very short temper and a very short fuse in a way that they never used to have. These can be symptoms of depression, especially when your low mood is accompanied by persistent guilt that just hangs around and won't go away. And maybe you feel guilty about everything. Maybe anything makes you feel guilty. Or maybe you don't even know why you feel guilty, but you just feel guilty all of the time. Self-loathing is also common. You really just feel worthless, as if you're not important and nothing matters, nothing about you or your life is meaningful. And you might feel helpless and out of control. So depressed people experience this change in mood differently, but depression is always accompanied by a negative change in mood and a negative change in the way that you feel about yourself and inside yourself. A fourth major area associated with depression is a complete lack of motivation. You might find that you just can't be bothered to do anything. You cannot find the motivation to do the things that you would normally do in your day. You might find yourself just going through the motions, or as if you're living on autopilot. This is very common in depression. You might find it really hard to motivate yourself to do more than the minimum, and sometimes you might not even be able to manage the minimum. The fifth area of symptoms relating to depression is physiological symptoms, things that happen in your body. Firstly, depression almost always causes problems with your sleep. Maybe you'll be unable to fall asleep, maybe you'll wake up during the night and not be able to go back to sleep, or very early in the morning and be unable to go back to sleep. Or maybe you will sleep heavily, dreamlessly, for much longer than you would normally do. Sleep disturbances are nearly always associated with depression. Whether you sleep too much or too little, you will likely feel exhausted when you wake up, and you may battle to find the energy to do anything at all. Sometimes, in severe cases, you may not even be able to manage a shower. Fatigue also sets in really easily through the day. You may find yourself utterly exhausted by lunchtime, where usually you would have had plenty of energy to get through the day. Changes in appetite are common. You may lose your appetite and eat much less than you normally would. Or you may find yourself comfort eating throughout the day. Either way, you probably will not take much pleasure in food. Even if you're eating too much, the food will be almost tasteless in your mouth. You'll be eating for the sake of eating rather than digging in and enjoying your meal. The last physical symptom is also very common when someone is depressed, and that is zero libido, no interest in sex. The sixth area of symptoms related to depression relates to interpersonal interactions, in other words, other people. If you're depressed, you'll find yourself withdrawing socially. You will not want to connect and engage with other people. You will feel exhausted even at the thought of going out or doing something fun and social, or you'll go out but just get through the evening on autopilot and be unable to enjoy yourself in the way that you would have prior to these depressive symptoms setting in. You tend to stop going out with friends and become quite isolated and withdrawn when you're depressed. Finally, feelings of depression are constant. They don't go away. There are not waves of depression. Depression kind of hangs in there all day, every day. It's like a constant undercurrent of misery that accompanies you throughout the day and even through the night. It's not like sadness, which is an emotion that comes and goes. It's a sadness that sets into your bones. It's a sadness that makes you feel heavy and weighs you down and that just doesn't let up. Depression persists. It goes on and on. And to meet the criteria for depression, you must have experienced these feelings and these symptoms for 2 weeks or more. Often, people will be depressed for a long time before they actually realize that they're depressed. Lastly, depression gets worse. If unattended, it does not go away. Many people think that if you just kind of ignore depression, that it will sort itself out, that it will go away on its own, but that is not the case. If left untreated and unattended, depression usually gets worse over time. So you have to take it seriously. If depression becomes severe, thoughts of suicide may be present, or they may be present and escalate and get much worse. You might feel like you can't stand to go on because it's just too hard. You might start to have thoughts that you're a burden on others, or that others would be better off without you. This is when depression starts to get dangerous. What a lot of people don't realize is that depression is not only dangerous in terms of the possibility that you may suicide. Depression is dangerous because of the massive impact that it has on your overall functioning and your ability to live your life, to engage with your family, to function at home, to function at work, and to have relationships. It's also dangerous because of the horrible impact that it has on your physical person. Depression is associated with all kinds of illnesses and systemic disorders. Depression is highly treatable, and depression responds quickly to the proper treatment. If you're in doubt, get a professional diagnosis. Generally, early intervention is the most effective, but even chronic and severe depression can respond well to the proper combination of medication and psychotherapeutic treatment. The proper treatment for depression is absolutely life-changing. So if you're experiencing some or all of these signs and symptoms, then please take yourself seriously and reach out to a licensed psychologist or a medical professional to get a proper assessment and diagnosis. If you've enjoyed this video, then please let me know in the comments, and please let me know if you'd like me to answer a specific question about mental health that you may have, or if this discussion has brought up some questions that were not answered. Please do let me know.